saplings on the Windrush National Organisation website as well. So before we go any further in this meeting, we just want to start, as we always do, by having a word of prayer, and then we'll commence with the meeting again formally. So those of you who wish to join us in prayer, we can do so now. Father, we just thank you for your mercy and goodness towards us. And Lord, we just thank you for keeping us this day. We just pray that everything that will happen will be to your order. We thank you for your mercy towards us. Continue to direct and bless this work as we look to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, just want to again give a big welcome. I'm going to be handing over very shortly to Bishop Desmond Jadu, who'll be giving some further information about the agenda for this evening. This is a moment where we can again respectfully and cordially engage. It is an opportunity for you to meet members of the Home Office who have kindly come again to this meeting. And it's an opportunity where we can get more information and hopefully be working towards the strapline of the Windrush National Organisation, which is advocating for better outcomes for the Windrush generation. So at this point, I'm delighted to hand over to our chair for the Windrush National Organisation, Bishop Desmond Jadu. Bishop Desmond.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to it's our first meeting of 2023. And first of all, I just want to thank everyone for their well wishes and prayers. I'm actually back on my feet, and thank you very much for that. Went through a little bit of a torrid time, but I'm here. But on some even better news, I just want to, I'm not too sure if we did this before, but in the Queen's Birthdays Honours List, one of our directors, Glenda Andrew, was awarded a British Empire Medal, and we just want to congratulate her for that. And also as well, in the New Year's Honours List, Reverend Clive Foster, our Vice Chair, was awarded an MBE, for which we had a nice little meal on Monday night in Nottingham for that as well. So just want to say formally congratulations to them both. There's something I just need to address here when I do this. We've seen some messages on social media regarding these awards, and one thing I will say is this: we're focusing upon the tireless work that people do, and it's good that their work is recognized, and that is it. That's all I'm going to say on it. So Clive, Glenda, congratulations, well done. And I'm sure that Dawn Hill would say to you, the mother of the Windrush National Organisation, is welcome to the club as well. So congratulations and well done there. So let's just, whoever wants to, just give her a little round of applause. Congratulations to you both. Right, so tonight's meeting, we're doing things slightly differently because we've got to have time management here. We are finishing at 8:30, and item 1 is the status and compensation update from the Home Office. And also as well, we've asked them to mention about status applications, because we're here, what we've noted, we're starting to get more people coming forward now with status applications. I mean, myself personally, I did about half a dozen in the past sort of 14 days, which is quite a significant number. And then there'll be an update on the Windrush Engagement Fund update, because we've had people contact us directly asking what's going on. And then the lessons learned review. Now, I know people may well ask about recommendation 3, not making no excuse for anyone, but the facts are the decision was made a lot higher than the people on this call tonight, and we have got high level managers on this call anyway. Yeah. However, I think it's important that the Home Office updates us also upon what's happening with the remaining 27. Which I'm sure we want to hear about, so that's important as well. I'm not saying don't ask your questions, but do bear in mind we want to know what's going on. And then round about 8:15, we'll curtail, and then we'll talk about Windrush 75. I'm a member of the steering group, so it's only right I feedback to you what's going on for Windrush 75. And also Nigel Guy, our director in Bradford, will be telling you about the products which the Windrush National Organisation support will be coming out with for Windrush 75, and the importance as well of the flag raising ceremonies as well. And then myself and Reverend Foster will be talking about the, we've had the feedback and everyone wants a conference for 2023. And we're in the process of looking at that, and our planning group meets next week. So we'll have an announcement on that next week, but you'll get an update then as well. So on that note, I think initially, well, I'll hand over to Andrew or Nigel. After each presentation, we will be taking questions at that point. So, and the timings will run for each segment. For this first segment, we're going to allocate up until 7:30 for this first segment. That's for the presentation and Q&A. And then we'll move to the next one, which will be about 10 minutes. That's for the presentation and Q&A. And then we'll allocate about 20-25 minutes in terms of the 27 remaining recommendations on the lessons learned review as well. Okay, so I hope we've got that. So we'll try and run that the best way we can. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'll hand over to Nigel. I think it's your turn. Am I right?
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
See if I can get the technology to work this time, because if you remember, I had to hold the slides up last time, which was quite embarrassing.
Yep, you're working quite well tonight.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So good evening, everybody. So my name is Nigel Hills. I am the lead for, well, the Windrush scheme. So I officially lead the Windrush compensation scheme, but I'm also accountable for the Windrush status scheme. And that has, as Bishop Jadu said, that hasn't had as much, has not entered into the conversation as much just lately. So I'll start with that. So the Windrush documentation scheme, that was where this all started in April 2018. And the scheme is to enable people who have a right to be in the UK, people who arrived here, many of them before 1973, but not all, who have a right to be in the UK. So they're settled in the UK, they've got indefinite leave to stay in the UK, but for some reason they haven't got the documentation to show that. And so what happened was, the problem with Windrush was a lot of these individuals, a lot of people have a perfect right to be here, but they haven't got documents to prove that, to show that. And so they got caught up with some of the checks that were made at banks and by landlords and by employers. So the Windrush scheme helps people get that documentation. Primarily, a big part of what we do focuses on Commonwealth citizens. So those Commonwealth citizens who were in the UK by 1973. So the 1st of January 1973 is an important date for this. So those people in the UK before the beginning of 73 and their children who were born here or came here before the age of 18. So that's the left-hand column on that. Those individuals can apply for documentation to confirm their status, and if they're eligible for British citizenship, they can also get a document to confirm British citizenship free of charge, and they don't have to do the normal life in the UK or an English language test, because that doesn't apply to those applications. And on the right-hand side of the screen, and I think this is what is not always understood, the status scheme also applies to any other person who arrived in the UK by the end of 1988, so before 1989, who is settled here, so who had indefinite leave to remain or settled status in the United Kingdom. They can also apply for documentation to confirm that status, and will issue a document usually called a no time limit document, something that shows that they can show to employers and to other people who need to see the confirmation. And then the last bit at the bottom is Commonwealth citizens who were settled in the UK by 1973 who are no longer settled in the UK. They can make an application to return to live in the UK from abroad, and they will just need to show, the teams will work with them, they'll need to show that they've maintained close and continuing ties with the United Kingdom. I've got some statistics later on. I haven't kind of come with loads of statistics. There's one slide later on which just says how many documents we've issued. So I'll come to those in a moment. There are some slides in this pack, which Bishop Jadu, I'll just move through quickly if that's okay. But what I can do is I can send this to you, and you can maybe upload it onto the website alongside the video of this call, just in the interest of time. I did just want to mention, though, about the compensation scheme, which flows not directly from the status scheme, but many people who couldn't confirm the status they had in the UK, and that's the key. So if you had a loss or an impact because you couldn't confirm that lawful status in the UK, and that's quite important. Some of the information that's circulating isn't as clear as it could be on social media. So if you've had a loss or you've had an impact because you couldn't confirm that lawful status in the UK, or your partner, your child, your brother, your sister had a loss because of that lawful status, that core is a lawful status, or you represent the estate of somebody who sadly died who was in that position, then you can make a claim under the Windrush compensation scheme, and we'll work with other government departments to get information to support that claim. So people of any nationality who arrived in the UK before, as I say, the end of '88 can make a claim under the Windrush compensation scheme. And the scheme is also open to the children and grandchildren of Commonwealth citizens. That's the first bullet. Close family members, so people who might have supported those individuals. And there's a new claim now called living costs, where people have been providing support for individuals who were unable to confirm their right to stay in the UK. And as I said on the previous slide, the estates of those who sadly passed away, who would have been eligible to make a claim, can claim under the Windrush compensation scheme. And there are 13 categories on which a primary claimant can claim, and 14 if you include close family members. But I'm not going to go through all of these, but suffice to say that they are all areas where people could have had some sort of loss, particularly a financial loss, as a result of that inability to confirm their lawful right, the perfect right to be here. And you can claim, if you were claiming under the scheme, on all of these categories. You don't have to pick one. The time to process a claim obviously depends on the complexity. The caseworkers will work with individuals to get the information that's needed. And importantly, there's no end date to either scheme. So the schemes are completely open-ended, so that anybody who needs to apply can do. I'm just going to skip over these if that's okay, because I'm conscious that we want to leave time for questions and answers. But our why, so I've said across every meeting I've been to and to all of my caseworkers, is to get the maximum award available at the earliest point possible. That's the kind of purpose of the scheme. And caseworkers will work with individuals and other government departments, HMRC and DWP employers, to get that information, to help to get that information to support that maximum payment. We've got a We Are Digital support provider at the front. Not very, I think we're going to look at the branding of that and the accessibility. But We Are Digital, they do provide hands-on support, even though they're called We Are Digital. They can help with application forms and making the application and through the process. And we've also got, some of you have engaged with the Vulnerable Persons team led by Marianne Mason, based in Sheffield, who both work with the We Are Digital, the frontline provider, but they also provide our own helpline, who you can ring and ask for advice and support. There's a Vulnerable Persons team for people who are really struggling. You can help with, for example, for support for housing and benefits. And in exceptional circumstances, there's also an urgent exceptional payment policy where a payment can be made. For example, where people move into unfurnished homes, we've provided furniture and what have you for emergency immediate needs that can't wait for the full compensation payment. And then almost there, just on the numbers. So over 20,000 people have applied to the Windrush status scheme. We're about to actually issue some new data. So that's to the end of, that will be to the end of December. This is to the end of September. That's the current data that's up on the website. And there's a link in the pack that I'll send over where you can see more details of that. But 20,000 people just over applied to the Windrush status scheme. So far, over 15,700 have been issued with documentation confirming their status or British citizenship. And of those, just short of 8,000 have been issued with documentation, which is around their British citizenship. And the bottom block of 4 stats there. And I appreciate this is about claims and people. So that's why I don't want to play up the stats. It's just to give a feel for what we're doing with the scheme. So in terms of the number of individuals, so 3,025 individuals have had a final decision on their claim. 64 million, well, 64.08 million we've paid or offered in compensation to people who've applied to the scheme, and so that's paid or offered. And within that, 53.98 million has actually been paid out to people across a little bit over 1,400 claims. And again, those 2 links there, I'll send over the pack. They link to quite a granular spreadsheet that we publish data every month on the details of the Windrush compensation scheme, and it gives details about how many have applied, the outcomes of those claims and what have you, and you can see that on our website. And that was it. Just the contact numbers, both of the helpline and how people can get support if they want to apply or find out more information. And if you just search online on the Windrush compensation scheme, all the casework guidance and the application guidance is readily available on the website. So that was quite a whistle-stop tour. Are we going to stop there for questions, Bishop Jadu, on
yes, if we
compensation?
Yeah, so I'll stop the screen from sharing. If you, yeah, right, okay. So at this point, Nigel's given a brief whistle-stop update in terms of compensation and status as well. We felt it important because this is all started off with people being unable to demonstrate their lawful status. Indeed, as I've said, as an organisation, I know that here in the West Midlands, but we've built with some people nationally, we've done about 6 or 7 over the past 2 weeks, which is quite a significant rise. And I'm sure colleagues have been doing other things as well. So at this point, any questions on compensation or status, please, anyone? Right, so Hitisha, if you'd like to unmute, we do like if you're able to turn your camera on as well. If you'd like to do that, would be great, but please unmute yourself and ask your question. Hi, good evening.
Okay, good evening. Good evening to all. In 2018, I applied for status, and I have in 2020 received, well, in the same September of 2018, came over to England because I was in St. Lucia at the time, and received our biometrics. My husband and myself, we received our biometrics. And in 2020, May of 2020, we received our citizenship. Now, just this week, I received the letters for the compensation stating that we did not, well, I personally, they have not said anything pertaining to my husband, they could not give us anything for compensation. My question this evening is, when I applied and my passport stamped right of abode, and I'm in the letter, it's stating indefinite leave to remain. I've never had indefinite leave to remain. I had a stamp stating right of abode. Now I need to find out from you what is the difference between the two, And if the Home Office is saying that I had indefinite leave to remain, which I never had, I never even knew of that. I only had the right of abode stamp. I came over to England in '63. Anyway, to me, once that paperwork and the status has been verified, in 2020, I got a letter stating to apply for compensation. Now I'm being denied the compensation, saying that my indefinite leave to remain, which I never had, was expired because of the time of my being out of the country. I just don't understand. Can you help me understand the difference between the two?
Thank you for that, Letitia. Nigel.
So, thanks, Letitia. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. We obviously can't get into individual claims because I haven't seen the details of your claim, but there is a difference between the right of abode and indefinite leave to remain. I mean, the right of abode is something that is what we would call an automatic claim. So it's akin to a citizenship. So a right of abode is something that you would have either through marriage or through birth. And indefinite leave to remain is an immigration status that is granted and issued. So they are different. Without seeing your details, I mean, it is possible to move from one to the other. Without seeing your details, it's very difficult to advise on the particular claim. What I would say, though, more broadly, is we are doing a lot more work to explain to people that just because people are eligible for the scheme, so because they are part of that Windrush generation, doesn't necessarily mean that they would be able to get compensation, because they'd have to show that there was a physical and material loss or a detriment because they were unable to demonstrate that lawful status. But Letitia, I've got obviously no way of saying whether what's happened to you is right or wrong. But what I would say is, and I don't know whether you've used this, there is a direct right of review. It's called a tier 1 review. It's free. You can ask for a completely independent review of that decision. And if you're not happy with that, then there's a tier 2, a separate review to an independent adjudicator who sits outside the Home Office, who can also look at that. And they're both free. There's no charge. And those individuals can look again at the claim and say, oh my God, that's not right, or that is right. And they will give you hopefully some reassurance that whatever decision has been made is correct.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, Nigel. Letitia, you've got our email address, the one you got the link from. If you want to email us in your details, and then we can obviously help you, guide you and raise that accordingly. All right, so if you just send in the decision letters, take photographs of them and email them to us at the Windrush National Organization at gmail.com. Charlie, can you put the email address in the chat, please, if you don't mind, and send that in to us, and we will we'll take it from there. Okay. I think it was Egbert next.
Hi, good evening. How you doing? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was going to say to Nigel, I'm glad you mentioned the statistics, because I've been looking at that over the past couple of months. I wanted to, there are several questions I wanted to ask you guys on that. Is there an address or email address I can email you directly?
I think if you send the questions to Bishop Jadu, he tends to collate those questions from this call, and then I can answer them all together.
This is specifically about the statistics, though. Can you authorize him to give me your email address so I can email you directly?
Yes. Yeah, you can email me with the question on the statistics. Yeah.
I'll give him a call and I'll ask him. All right, thank you.
Egbert, if you want to just email me directly, and then you can call me as well, and we'll sort that out. I'll do it through email. Thank you for that. Okay, I think Richard Black, good evening.
Bishop Jadu, can I just say on the statistics, Egbert, if you go to the very front of the transparency pack, there's a whole page of kind of notes and explanations. So I'm not saying they'll answer your questions, but they may answer your questions, but I'm very happy to help if they don't.
Thanks for that. I've looked at the notes and explanations, and that's why I want to email you directly.
Okay, great. Thank you, Egbert. Richard Black, good evening. And it's been a while. Welcome. Hope you're keeping well.
Thank you very much, Bishop Jadu, and belated Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody in the UK. Nigel, a pleasant good afternoon to you. Good evening to you, sir. It's afternoon in Trinidad and Tobago. Nigel, I arrived in the UK at the age of 6 in 1960. I arrived at the time of the British passport issued by the St. Lucian government at the time. Somewhere in 76, or in 76, I got a British passport, a full British passport. I was informed because of St. Lucia gaining independence in 1979, the 22nd of February 1979, that I was no longer a citizen. But I know for a fact that I've already settled in the UK. I spent 22 years in the UK from 1960 to 1983 when I went on an extended vacation, right? So I'm trying to understand how it is now, right, that I've been basically bullied into getting a St. Lucian passport by the Home Office, right? And the evidence of that you could verify by going through the documents and whoever my caseworker might be at this time into getting a St. Lucian passport, which I have no problem with at this time, right? But to me, that sounds, based on what you said early on, to me, that sounds very contradictory and unfair. Can you clarify, please? Hello?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Rich. I was just thinking, like I said to the in the previous answer, one, it's impossible to get into individual case specifics on these calls, but I am aware of the work the team have been doing with you, and I am aware of some of the support and the advice.
Nigel, let me just
so I can look at that separately.
Let me just briefly interrupt you. I'm giving you permission to discuss my case. I have nothing to hide. You could discuss my case publicly. I have no problems with that at all.
Well, Richard, I don't know every single case of the detail. I know that the vulnerable persons team have been working with you, and I can look into the circumstances of what has actually been said. But I mean, it would be, I mean, how you'd appreciate it would be impossible for me to know all of the details of the thousands of claims that we deal with.
But you just said that you're aware of my case, so I don't understand.
I'm aware that there've been a number of contacts with you by and with the vulnerable persons team and with our status teams abroad, and I know that some support has been authorized and given, but the details of the St. Lucia passport and the details of the actual claim, forgive me, I'd have to go back and ask for advice then.
All right, so I could email you directly then, because I have your email address.
If you have my email address, you can email me, but I will go back and ask the team for an update on where and what they have done in relation to the support that they offered you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. You have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, Nigel. Before we move on to the next item, there's an interesting comment here, and it's an issue that I also have, Nigel, is people who had an inability to return to the UK, particularly from holidays, because we've got a case coming up where a lady was, we call it being trapped. Basically, they go abroad, they go to the airport, they get told by the airline, you can't come back into the UK because you've got no right to be there. Cases which happened 2016, 2017, 2018. And they've had to demonstrate their status, the fact that they were in the UK and they have a life here. And then they were allowed back into the UK. And although we know that there's an impact on life, but there's nothing in the scheme to actually cover the fact that for a 3-month period, they were actually barred from coming back to the UK. It's something, it's mentioned in the chat, and it's something that I wish to acknowledge. And it's something obviously that we may have to write to you about in terms of that, where people are barred to enter the UK by the airlines.
Yeah, so if a person who has a lawful right to live in the UK is barred from re-entering, then that obviously would be covered by what we're dealing with in the scheme. I see the comment in the sidebar, and I would just say that my job is not to ban, block, or debar people from compensation. My job is to pay compensation to everybody and anybody that qualifies within the scheme. So so it is tricky to be able to confirm that initial status, and in the case of people who had historic settled status, that continuing in close ties with the UK. But if and when a decision is made, there's the same rights of review as I've mentioned before in relation to the earlier question, both an independent review internally and then a tier 2 review by the independent adjudicator, and that's open to everybody, and they're all free. There's another question about in the sidebar, Bishop Jadu. I don't know. Shall I answer who I am?
Well, I was going to let you do that, but I'll do the first bit. Anita's question is: this meeting is very vague. I do not understand the purpose. One, who is Nigel and what is his designation? Anita, these are monthly meetings that we have, although we haven't had one for a couple of months, with the Home Office to advise people who are victim advocates and also campaigners as to where we are. It's an opportunity to talk to senior staff at the Home Office as well. So on tonight's call, we do have Nigel Hills, who is head of Windrush, the Windrush compensation. He oversees a status scheme as well. So he's actually he's at director level within the Home Office. I hope I've got that right. We've got Angela Wilson also, who oversees the changes in the Home Office in terms, particularly with the Wendy Williams review as well. And they're assisted tonight by Rubina, who is also from the Home Office. So I hope that clears that up in terms of your question. The last question in the the last question, in-person question, will come from LS. If I can ask them to unmute and show their face. But in the meantime, Nigel, this is an interesting question. Dawn Hill asked this question: why were the airlines stopping people from coming back home when they took them abroad in the first place?
So this is not my direct area of responsibility, but there is something called carrier's liability. So if a carrier brings a person to the UK who hasn't got the right to enter the UK, then the carrier can be liable for that and will need to return them at their own cost. And there's also potential penalties for those carriers. So airlines have a duty under that regulation to make sure that people who can travel to the UK have the right, the lawful right to travel.
Okay, thanks for that, Nigel. That's something that I think is going to be coming up a bit more with some of the claims that are going to be coming in. But the final question on this section, and it is the final question, LS, thank you for putting your camera on. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
I'd like to know, Nigel, you're the head of the Windrush compensation scheme. Now, I've been told there are different stages when you make an application, because a friend of mine made an application and I realized that there were different stages. So what stage, because I've been This is all what I've been told anyway, so I'm just checking. There's a preliminary stage, and then it's passed to a caseworker.
Yes.
Is that the case?
So what will happen is that, so the first thing that happens when you apply is the first thing we'll do is confirm who you are and whether you're actually eligible for the scheme. So are you part of that Windrush cohort? As soon as we can confirm that, which is quite quick in most cases, within 6 weeks of that, of confirming that eligibility, we'll make an assessment, an initial assessment of the claim. And if you have any sort of impact of life, any indication of an impact of life, then we aim to make a £10,000 preliminary payment. So it's a kind of a first payment.
Well,
Sorry. And then,
right,
so you'll get a letter. So the person should get a letter after that, 6 weeks from when we confirm the eligibility for the scheme, as to whether we can make a preliminary payment at that stage. And that will depend how much information there is to confirm what we call level 1. So the very first impact of life. If there's any impact of life, any evidence of that in what we've got, then we'll make a £10,000 payment. After that, it moves on to a full casework decision. So you'll get a contact from a caseworker. We do checks with the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, and HMRC. And the caseworker will then help you to get whatever information is needed or missing, and they will make a decision on all of the other categories of the compensation scheme, whichever ones you've applied for out of those 14 that I mentioned when I had the slide back up earlier. Does that help?
Well, not quite, because this particular person made an application, and it came out that they were eligible.
Okay.
And then the application was made on the grounds of the impact it had on her life. What I don't understand is, they said she was eligible, and she focused on the impact it had on her life, what happened to her. And then she was told that it's got to go to a caseworker, but they wanted more information. She sent quite a lot of information, and she had quite a lot of evidence to prove what happened to her. Yet still, there was no feedback. And then they said it had to go to a caseworker. I don't know, because I don't understand the scheme. And she said somebody contacted her and asked her quite a lot of questions. But it's like they were challenging her application. And she found it very, very stressful.
Okay, can I just intervene there? I think the way we can deal with this constructively, if you can email us her details with her consent, okay, we can get a signed authority off her, and we can then raise that so that we can get a formal response out to you. How's that? Because clearly that's the most constructive way for us to deal with that. And just email us. The email is in the chat, and also as well, it's where you got the link from as well. So just email us that information and we'll deal with that constructively. Thank you very much. What's your first name? Ellis, it said. But the very last question in this section, I did say it before, Egbert, we'll have to come back to you later on a different section, is Anita did have a question. So I can ask you, Anita, if you don't mind quickly asking your question, so we can move on with the agenda, please. And if anyone, sorry, Anita, one sec. To ask questions, all you got to do is just put your hand up on the function at the bottom of the screen. Anita, good evening.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I don't think this situation applies to myself because I was born and raised in the UK. But I was given the link by a friend of mine who I've just heard the previous conversation. So I'm going to suggest that she actually contacts the organisation herself and let her deal with it. So I just wanted to listen in. I just find it very vague, the information by Nigel. I don't know who, I heard what you said, Nigel. I can't remember what you said his name was. as to what is his role in this situation with people trying to seek compensation, and what are they trying to keep, why are they seeking compensation, what for? For flights, coming back into the UK after they've refused entry, which means they have to find more monies to pay again? Is it for accommodation, where they maybe went on holiday in the Caribbean or Africa or wherever this actual situation applies to? And why is it taking all this, the few people who know it's taken months for it to be resolved? I'll just cut it there because I could go on forever.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the slides were up at the beginning of the meeting. You may have missed those, but a lot of the information is already contained in our website if you go there. I'm not responding for Nigel, but the facts are a lot of that information is already there. The previous meeting in November also contained a comprehensive presentation on the Windrush compensation scheme as well. Respectfully, however, we've been advocating for people who have applied for compensation and status. So please respectfully, once we ask someone to email us the information, they email it to us, and then we do take the cases on. And Nigel and Angela will tell you, we do not hesitate to get emails over to them and expect answers as well. And on this call, we've got Glenda Caesar, we've got Reverend Clive Foster, we've got Claude, we have many of our advocates from around the country. So therefore, we will do what we have to do in terms of taking things forward. Now, in terms of our agenda, we're going to move on now to...
thanks for your response. Thank you for your response. It wasn't helpful, but thank you anyway.
That's fine. That's fine. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. And, you know, thank you.
It was very general.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to move on to Angela, who's going to update us on the Windrush Engagement Fund. Good evening, Angela.
Good evening, Bishop Jadu, and good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Wilson. I head up the Windrush External Engagement Team, and I've been working on the Windrush programme since Wendy Williams' report was published in March 2020. So that's my background. I've got an extensive knowledge of working on the Windrush subject, but my current role is heading up the engagement team, which is why I'm present at this meeting here today. So the Windrush Community Engagement Fund was a pot of money that we put towards bridging a gap that we saw was left from the 2 rounds of the Windrush Community Fund. Now that fund was launched to raise awareness about the help and support available through the Windrush Documentation Scheme and the Windrush Compensation Scheme. It ran for 2 rounds, but both when Wendy Williams reported and also ourselves from our own analysis, we found that it wasn't quite successful in reaching nations wider than the Caribbean. So we wanted to just do a little top up of that to make sure that we went out again and reached those communities that we felt we weren't satisfied in our heart, that we felt that we had actually cascaded the information wide enough. So we launched the scheme in September. Down to that 9 degrees, that's what causes us down quickly. 2022 to look into that issue, and also to give us some understanding and insight as to why some people have applied for documentation scheme but hadn't gone ahead and applied for compensation scheme. So that was the reason behind launching the Windrush Community Engagement Fund. It's a pot of money of £150,000, so not a huge pot of money, but as I say, it had a specific role to just bridge the gaps that we thought was left unaddressed. Now, the closing date for the scheme, for people to apply to the scheme, was the 21st of October. And we did actually give an undertaking when we launched the scheme that those who had applied would get a decision by the end of November, and then we would actually get the pot of money out to the successful bidders. So I come today with a sincere apology that we actually didn't meet that commitment. We actually haven't given out any decisions in regards to the Community Engagement Fund. Now, the reasons behind that is all down to internal processes. We had a governance process that we had to work through to get sign off of our shortlisted applicants. We had 70 bidders apply for funding. And then we had a shortlisting process we had to go through. But almost from the beginning, we actually started to encounter internal problems in regards to that. That's all I can say in the matter, that it meant that the time was ticking on, and we've now reached where we are today, and we still haven't issued that decision. So as I say, I'm quite happy to come with an apology and let you know that it's down to internal processes and governance problems that we have. But we have actually put up a new proposal. It's now going through our governance process to see if we can have approval to relaunch the scheme again in the new financial year. That's going through its governance process. We haven't actually had approval for that, but in view of the time that has lapsed, that is what we're hoping to gain approval to do, to relaunch it again in the new financial year. But I don't come with any commitments or guarantees that we get approval to do that. But that is our aspiration, so that we can actually still meet that last commitment to reach out to those communities that we think we haven't reached. But as I say, my main reason for happily updating today is to just come with an apology that this is the current situation. And we do apologise that we didn't manage to get a decision out within the time available. But as I say, we're actually seeing what we can do to remedy that and actually conclude this round of the bids as soon as we possibly can. That is the community fund.
Thank you very much, Angela. I don't really think there's any further questions we can put there on that. So I'd just like to move on because I know that establishment fund was a part of an engagement, was a part of the Wendy Williams recommendations anyway.
Yes, yes.
But I need to reiterate the concerns that have been fed into our organisation, that people are unhappy because they took their time to actually write a bid in the first place for funds. And they're not happy at the fact that after spending all that time, that no decisions have been forthcoming yet. So that's just for the record, so that you're aware that's where the complaints that we've had, where they stand as well. And it is right that we ensure that that's on the record. But moving on, let me just have a quick look at the chat. The lessons learned review, progress in terms of what's happening with the remaining 27 recommendations, and also as well to update in terms of the 3 which have been the Home Secretary decided to withdraw the promise that was made in the first place. So back to you, Angela.
Okay, thank you. So back to me. So yes, in regards to the Windrush lessons learnt review recommendations, there were 13 recommendations. The department published a written ministerial statement to Parliament on the 26th of January, and that gave a comprehensive update on all 30 recommendations. Now, I'm going to actually highlight some of the good things out of that update, but in summary, I will actually say that when Wendy Williams actually revisited the Home Office back in March last year, she concluded that 21 out of the 30 recommendations had either been met or partially met. And she did acknowledge that whilst there was more work to be done, she did acknowledge that change on that scale is going to take time. So we weren't actually criticised for the progress we made. She's acknowledged that it is going to take time. But we have indeed made progress. And the things I would want to update you or highlight to you today is that in regards to the learning packages, out of the 30 recommendations, there were 3 learning packages. Recommendation 24 was that we would work on the Home Office values and acknowledge and give training on our values. We have begun to roll out training in regards to our values. We're in the process of rolling out a serving diverse communities and acting on our values training. That's for all Home Office staff to understand and buy into the Home Office values of respect, compassion, collaboration. And there was a 4th one, which I can't actually come to mind. But anyway, 4 of our recommendations we're actually taking forward our values. That the Home Office actually training people on acting on our values and making sure that that's foremost in our policy considerations and our operational work. That's closely followed by some work training that's been rolled out on diversity and inclusion for senior civil servants to make sure that we are always mindful that our workforce represents the society, the communities we serve. So it's all about being diverse and inclusive in everything we do, and there's training being rolled out on that. But the most training of the learning packages of interest, which is recommendation 6, the history of the UK and its relationship with the rest of the world. That training package is now complete and is about to be rolled out to all Home Office staff in the coming weeks. And that is training for the staff so that we can understand the history of the UK, its relationship with the Commonwealth and the rest of the world, and how we should correctly apply that to all our work. So it's just to say that that's in the process of being rolled out to Home Office staff in the coming weeks and months. Other updates I'm able to give: in October last year, we established the Office for the Independent Examiner of Complaints. And we appointed a independent examiner. Moram Ali was appointed as the independent examiner following a public appointment process. So that means that if anyone wants a review on our Home Offices, if they've got a complaint against the Home Office, there's now an independent body set up to look at that complaint and to review that complaint. And it's actually not done by those that you were actually complaining against. There's now an independent body. So that again is one of the recommendations recommended by Wendy. And a very, very recent improvement that progress that I'd want to update you on is recommendation 7. That's the review of the compliant environment measures. Last week, we published 4 documents that are available on Gov.uk to view, which is our first steps to actually review the compliant environment and say what measures are in place to ensure that those who are entitled can access work, benefits and services, and that those with that entitlement are not in any way adversely impacted by the compliant environment measures. It's not the end game. There's more work to be done. They're going to be doing more analysis and research into the compliant environment. But this is a major, major step forward in what we said when we said we would review and evaluate the compliant environment, that we have now published 4 documents in regards to that, which you can indeed view on Gov.uk. The ministerial statement did indeed say that there's 3 recommendations. And we're not saying we're withdrawing, we're just actually saying that they're not going to be implemented as Wendy Williams as envisaged. But it doesn't mean that the department doesn't buy into the spirit or intent of the recommendations. That's made clear in the written statement. Now, those are recommendation 3, the reconciliation events. A lot of work went into looking into how we should host reconciliation events to take forward the spirit and intent as given by Wendy Williams. Rabina's online here now. She was actually the working lead taking forward that piece of work. And we actually did commission an independent person to actually look into, if we were to run the events, how they should be designed, how should they be held, and whether there actually was an appetite for the events. We had 2 reports done, one on testing the appetite for it, and then saying if we were to go forward with them, how would they be designed? And both reports went before ministers before a decision was made in regards to recommendation 3. But what was also taken into the balance is the scale, the sensitivity of the subject matter itself. What would be the benefit of actually having an events that's solely about people coming to talk about the trauma of what the Windrush scandal had done to them. So worked in the round, as I say, not saying that we wouldn't want to do it, but what we're actually, the Home Office acknowledge is actually from the day that the scandal first broke, the Home Office has never, ever shied away from meeting stakeholders and attending meetings and listening to the traumas and the stories as people want to tell them. And we continue to attend stakeholder meetings to present date. And that is what the department said we will continue to do. We won't have specific events, but if we have occasion to be engaging with stakeholders, and we will continue to engage stakeholders, it is that is what we would want to do. There is an opportunity for people to, if they wish to tell their story, and for senior officials who are, as you say, you've got director level officials at this meeting here today, that people are open and willing to listen to that. So I would want you to take away that it isn't about not doing it because we don't want to do it. It's because we've actually said we will just continue to do what we always do, which is being open and engaging and being willing to listen. And recommendation 3 was also about making sure that there's final financial compensation for anyone that has been wronged. And Nigel's just given an update about the payments paid out in regards to the compensation scheme, and that the continuing work to make improvements to the scheme. That again, the spirit and intent of Wendy Williams saying we must put right the wrongs is something that I would say is foremost in the Home Office's mind. We've now paid out and offered £64 million, paid out £53 million in compensation. So again, the spirit and intent of Wendy Williams in regards to recommendation 3, that is how we would say we would want to continue to do that. Not saying we're getting it right, we're always making changes as we go along all the time. And we're always open to learning from what we're not doing right and what we could do better. But again, my message is it doesn't mean that because we haven't run out the reconciliation events, that the spirit and intent of that recommendation hasn't been addressed. Same too for the Migrants Commissioner. A huge amount of work was put into understanding what would be the role of a Migrants Commissioner, what would a Migrants Commissioner do. But in the end of the day, the decision was taken that what the Home Office will continue to do is work closely with our immigration stakeholders, making sure that there's an amplified voice for anyone who has any concerns, migration issues. And then there is, as I say, the independent body to look into any complaints if anyone thinks anything goes wrong. So again, the need for a specific person with that role, the Home Office thought we would do it in a different way. And it's same too for the review of the ICIBI. The decision was taken that the Home Office works very closely with all our arm's length bodies and are consistently reviewing the processes. We are consistently audited and work with quite a few agencies to look into the propriety of the work and how it works with the relationship with the Home Office. So again, a specific review, as Wendy intended. It's not that we would shy away from that, but we actually think we already have measures in place to do that. So that is really an update of the recommendations, and where I'd say, yes, there's 3 out of the 30 that we say we would do differently, other than the way how Wendy Williams intended. But I would stress that the spirit and intent of what Wendy Williams has set out to achieve is still foremost in the Home Office's mind. It's all about a cultural change. It's all about leaving ourselves open to scrutiny, being able to engage with our stakeholders, being accessible to our stakeholders, making sure that people can read and communicate with us at all levels, not just at senior levels. Those are the things that Wendy has set out in her 30 recommendations. And I wouldn't say any of them, even with the 3 we're not doing, are we shying away from the spirit and intent of what Wendy Williams has asked of the department and what we ever committed to do. So that is the update on the 30 recommendations. I don't know if there's any specific recommendations. I mean, I don't work, as I say, I'm head up the engagement team, but if I can help with any of the recommendations that I haven't covered, then I'm happy to do so. But I know the learning recommendations and the reconciliation events and the 3 we're not going ahead with are the ones that was of foremost interest whenever I present to the WNO.
Thanks for that update, Angela. We have put the Wendy Williams lesson learned review in the chat so people can see that. We've got another 14 minutes for questions at this point. So we've got a number of hands up, so we're going to go straight to them. And I'm going to ask Mary if you can unmute and come on screen if you could and give your question. Mary.
They said to go on screen. Will you put my face on it?
Oh, you just press start video. Okay. Well, it's still, okay, no, it's not. It's not still, all right.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you, Mary.
Hello,
Thank you.
Mary.
Right. Well, hi, everyone. I hope you had a good day, and I hope you have a great week going forward. To be honest, coming from the West Indies, and I guess I have similar frame of mind to the people who's been done wrong. I'm not part of the compensation seeking, but I find the whole thing a farce. It's very boring. That lady called Angela, who cares what you have to say? It's like reading something from a book when she speaks.
Sorry, Mary, do you have a question? I think you've made your point, but
well, y'all always try to stop people from telling it like it is.
No, we don't want that. We're inviting people to ask questions, and you're just giving some statements at the moment. So if you could quickly get to your question, then we would appreciate that.
The question is, why don't you lot just give the people who the Home Office has done wrong, not just the Home Office, the government have done wrong, just give them the bloody money. That's it. Because you all know that the money is owing to them, especially those Black people. They're worse because they're speaking with the voice and the words of the so-called whites who is doing us wrong from Africa to the West Indies to here, and y'all keep on pretending that, oh, it's all right. Y'all have no intention of giving these people any money. Y'all just making overtime pay for yourself, the whole lot of y'all. And if I was wanting to get any compensation there, I would just go along with my own advice and advise people, just forget about the whole thing. Because the only people who's making money is all of y'all who working for the government making money. But the people who deserve the money, they are not going to get anything. They should scrap the whole thing and ask for reparations.
Okay,
then they will have grounds. They'll have grounds to get money for a good reason.
Thanks, Mary. I think you've made your point that you wanted to make, and I think you've made that strongly. I'm going to invite Glenda Caesar to come forward.
All right. Yeah. Hi, Angela.
Hello, Glenda.
I was listening to the where you spoke about the reconciliation events thing. It's not really a question. I don't know who we're going to have to defend that, because that's one of the recommendations they shouldn't have taken away, because the stakeholders are not really the people who suffered, and that would have given the people who have suffered a voice for them to at least let the Home Office know how they feel. But you know, I don't know how we challenge that. It's gone to the Home Secretary, who hasn't got any consideration or empathy for the people who have suffered, because that would have given them the chance for them to listen, because nothing was put in place to deal with the well-being. It's advocates are having to be the ones that have to take the, how can I put it, the rock, because we've still got people who come to us and they still have got that anger and they still want to, but there's, you know, they can sell it to us, but there's no way we can push it to you for you lot to understand. So that bit alone, it's a bit disappointing where they took that away from us. But who do we have to fight? You know, because we can't rely on your team to deal with that for us to say put that recommendation in. But it's like a losing battle, and I understand how Mary feels. I'm not having a go at you. This is just my viewpoint on this on the reconciliation events being taken away. It was just a waste of money. They shouldn't have even put out the money out there to even, I forgot the lady's name, but that's just my views. Why saying that?
In regards to who you can completely, there is always scope for you to say, you know, we have had many representations about the recommendations, and there is nothing preventing anybody from making their representations and their feelings known. So if you wish to, then you are entitled to say, you know, please reconsider. But as I say, the decision is that it's not that there isn't an intent or a wish to listen. It's just that they thought that having a specific event for that, where people are encouraged to come just to say how they've suffered, wouldn't be. You know, the idea is to build trust and confidence in department, that by reissue and revisiting the trauma they experienced, without say how we address it and help put it right, other than the compensation scheme that already exists.
Yeah, then can I just say this then? your vulnerable persons team, which is supposed to be there to assist the people who have the vulnerability and who have been affected, perhaps the Home Office should then install or get some psychologists in there, or some sort of therapy, so that they know at least they can have someone that they can speak to and let them know exactly how this thing affected them, because there's a lot of people who are vulnerable who still want to talk about it. So perhaps that's something you lot should be implementing, because that's what the reconciliation would have done. It would have given them an outlet for them to say, look, this is how I was affected. This is the way I feel. But that's been taken away now. So perhaps it's something that your team or the compensation team need to look into, find the therapy, because these people do need therapy. They didn't ask for this, but they were affected. But that's my views, and
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. I'm going to bring in Dr. Enabong. If you want to come on, you've unmuted. If you speak up, and we can't hear you if you're speaking, and if you want to come on camera, Dr. Enabong. So, not sure if you're trying to speak into the microphone, but we cannot hear you. We can now.
Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, we can now. Go for it. We're getting trouble with your. We're not hearing anything. Perhaps if we come back to you, Dr. Enabong, you might have some issues with your audio. Are you speaking? Oh yeah, probably if you come back to us after this next call. I'm going to bring in Egbert.
Hi, Glenda. Yeah, I think I need some counselling. I was going to ask Angela a question,
Yes.
which is, because you mentioned it, what is the purpose of the is it the cross-government working group, and why is it that sessions or groups like this, plus all the others, can't feed into that in view of the access they've got to all the government departments? When you look at things like the Home Office, Housing, GWP, blah, 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 the whole lot, why is it that WNO, Preston, Windrush, why can't, and even myself, and as Glenda just said, in view of the experiences, why is there not a way that the experiences, the views, the impressions can be filtered and fed into that group? Yeah. Because that's talking directly to the heart of government, and it's the heart of government that created the problem.
Well, my response is that this group too is getting to the heart of government. My team manages the Windrush Cross-Government Working Group. My team and my colleagues attend the Windrush National Organisation, and events are actually fed and supported by at ministerial level, like both groups, both with the WNO and with the Cross-Government Working Group. Now, the Cross-Government Working Group was set up at the time of the Wendy Williams report to make sure that the recommendations that Wendy Williams made was not just only impacting on the Home Office, but that there was changes being implemented at all parts of government. So it's made up of representation from across government as well as community representation, so that everyone can hear firsthand what other government departments are doing, and firsthand other government departments can hear what the community is doing, understanding that it's a section of the community. So in regards to them, not the voices of the community that I'm speaking to here now, not getting to the heart of government, that is not the case, because I will say the national organisation and the cross-government working group are both managed by a central secretariat, which is my team. We manage engagement on both sides. Okay,
Angela, if you can ask Desmond to give me your email also, if that's okay.
Oh, well, okay, I could give you, we have a generic mailbox.
Not a problem.
Yeah, Windrush engagement.
I've got nothing against the working group or Desmond, but there are certain issues about this whole saga which perturbed me and still continues to concern me. Yeah, I'm going to ask Nigel another question. Sorry, I'll be very, very quick. The woman earlier on from St. Lucia who was speaking about not being allowed to re-enter the UK, having left, and there was reference to the airlines having a duty of care or whatever. What I found very odd about this was I've traveled in and out of the UK on my, at the time, Guyanese passport for many years, on many occasions, by myself and with family. But all of a sudden, at a particular period of time, that became a problem and an issue. I was never prevented from returning into the UK, but I was given a lot of problems. And I believe that the background behind all of this was either interpretation of legislation that was being implemented, or policy, or politics. Yeah.
So yeah, Egbert, I'm going to have to rush you on. Is there a specific question that you're asking of Nigel? Because we've only got a few more minutes left around the lessons learned review, and I know you're going back to something else. Was there a specific question you wanted to ask?
Has the Home Office so far identified a period of time when a certain amount of these problems started about returning into the UK by the applications for compensation so far made?
Okay, Nigel, I don't know if you want to briefly respond to that. If you can, or if not, we can get information back to our colleagues at a later date.
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I mean, there were some issues about the ILR lapsing policy that we put on the website, that we clarified about how and what interpretation was given to that, which actually was a very generous interpretation. I mean, the update makes it clear that it's always been the case that if people are outside the UK for more than 2 years, then that permission to remain in the UK indefinitely would lapse. So I don't know what you're referring to in terms of a specific point in time. Certainly, like most pieces of legislation, the immigration legislation and the carrier's liability legislation, somebody posted it in the sidebar, has changed over time. And for that, I mean, I'm definitely not being sloppy-shouldered about it. I'm an official. I'm politicians.
No, Nigel, I understand where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. Okay, I'll accept what you said, sir. I'll put it in the email to you.
Thank you very much, Egbert. We've only got about a minute and a half and such, so I'm going to bring in Dr. Inabon. Can we hear from you again? We've got 2 more.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay. Just really sorry. Just to finish what the last caller was saying, that it wasn't about leaving the country for 2 years. We had West Indian Caribbean nurses going to France for day trips and being denied access back in on day trip, you know, with their British passports. Are you sure you belong here? Are you sure you're allowed to come back in the country? So that isn't anything to do with the 2 years popping off and visiting family. So that doesn't happen to British people going to Spain up to now or ever, whether they're gone for 2 years or 6 years or 20 years, they can come back in the country without those questions being asked. But I don't want to be personal, and I appreciate Angela very much, because when we talk about getting diverse staff, we're talking about people who, like yourself, who understand where we're coming from and the background that we've come from. And I do feel that we can turn on each other, and it's a hurt people thing. But when we look back at the apartheid regime, and when they came to the end of that regime, they realized they couldn't go forward in any kind of just or justice way without a truth and reconciliation process. And it was something that was televised, that everybody in the country, white, black, or inverted commas, coloured in the South Africa, because I was a part of the anti-apartheid movement when I was younger. And you couldn't go forward as a country with those many people hurt. You know, there isn't enough therapy. There aren't enough therapists in the NHS or private to deal with the impact that the Windrush scandal has had on people from Africa and Asia, and specifically the Caribbean. So not having the reconciliation process, I think the sister was trying to say that is a major failure. You can't pay enough money to reconcile my children, my grandchildren, and the impact that being denied going out for a day trip and then coming back in the country and wondering if you're going to be allowed back to go to work on Monday, and what that it has on you. You can't compensate enough for being told at school or university that we don't think you're appropriate to stay on this course, or you aren't satisfying the criteria that have been made up as the process is going on. You cannot pay anybody for the impact that that's had on their growing, on their adult livelihood, and on their children and grandchildren. So that is something that we still must have, not we should have, we must have a public reckoning of the impact that has. And as the brother says, we do need therapy. We do need to look at the way it's impacted our mental well-being. I mean, I'm sitting here now trying not to cry about the impact it's had on my mum and my sisters. And we've all gone to university, we've all got careers, but how brilliant we could have been if we had not gone through being treated as refugees, not to be discriminatory to any refugee, because this country cannot survive without the refugee class of this country. And my mother and my father came here to work in the NHS in the 50s and brought up children that are still working in the NHS in the 2020s. And this country cannot survive without us. But the impact on us daily, getting on a bus, going on a holiday to France or the Caribbean or Spain, has that traumatizing impact on us. That must be publicly and televised, reconciled. And I appreciate Angela and the gentleman from the Home Office, but we have to have that reconciliation.
Thank you, Dr. Enabong. You've made your point very powerfully and very well. And I'm just going to introduce these last two questions, and then if there's anything else, Angela, you want to say. So if we can just quickly go to Gertrude and then to Hetishia, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I've been coming to these meetings for I don't know how many years since they've been going. I always come and say the same thing. So today I'm going to talk about recommendation 5, which is look beyond the Caribbean. First of all, I'd like to know whether that's been scrapped totally. Secondly, I'd like to know why so many Nigerian victims, including my family and friends, who satisfy all the eligibility criteria for the Windrush scheme, have been refused under the Windrush scheme. They lived here before 1973, every box is ticked, and yet they've still been refused. Nigel, I want to ask you, if they've been refused and the reviews have been unsuccessful, what then happens to those people when they are clearly eligible for returning resident visas? I want all these cases to be looked at again, because this has been going on for 5 years, and my relatives, my friends are still stuck in Nigeria. I'm not even talking about compensation, but they have a right to be here. They were here for decades. They have a right to be here. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Gertrude. Thank you. Hetishia?
Hetishia?
Yep.
Yes.
Give your question and then
to
Angela.
Nigel, I want to ask a question with regards to it has to do with the reconciliation, because going through the process from 2018 personally, which is now 5 years, coming up to 5 years, and I still have not had my husband and myself has been involved, and we still have not had the opportunity to speak with someone from the Home Office personally. You know, I heard Nigel said earlier that the caseworkers will get in touch and work along with you. Well, I've had the first letter after we applied, the second letter to say that they were trying to get in touch with me and my representative. And then I responded. At no time at all have I personally spoken to a caseworker. I don't even know if it's a male or female. And I feel the interaction with your caseworker, they're supposed to be talking with you, speak to get, I mean, the amount of trauma, it's not easy to speak to. I spoke to one fella from the vulnerable unit, He called me a few times, Stephen. When I called him, then I'm hearing that he's no longer in the department, and I never heard from anybody else from the vulnerable unit department. It just seems like there's a brick wall, and it was the same thing back in the 70s when I encountered this situation. A brick wall just is up in front of you, and it's like the same situation all over again.
Thank you, Letitia. So engagement. So Angela, if you want to come back on recommendation 5, any update on that, and Nigerians, and Nigel, if you want to comment on engagement and personal contacts.
Yeah. Recommendation 5 is a recommendation. I actually was talking about the Community Engagement Fund and said that that's what we seek to do. We seek to go wider than the Caribbean with our engagement. So even if we're unsuccessful in getting the Community Engagement Fund off the ground, then we will be looking at other ways. So recommendation 5 is something we want to address. We want to make sure that we have gone wider than just the Caribbean to spread the word and make sure everybody's aware that they can apply for compensation. There are issues. I mean, I can't come in again. I'm not aware of the individual cases, but I do know, Gertrude, that you have been working with the department for quite a while on individual cases. So yeah, there are issues there that's got to be resolved on a case-by-case basis. But yes, recommendation 5 is something we will continue to make sure we reach wider than the Caribbean, or we engage wider than the Caribbean. In regards to recommendation 3, I actually really did appreciate all the feedback that I've got back on recommendation 3. So at least I can say that will be fed back to the centre. I could take back the views, which I knew would be shared, that on the recommendation event, so you feel about that. I will feed that back, so that will go back to the centre. Again, can't give any guarantees there'll be any difference in decisions, that they've made a decision in regards to that. But the feelings will be there. But I also do agree that if we did do them, it has to come with some sort of support, some sort of psychological support. You just cannot invite people to just come and tell their stories and just say, thank you very much and goodbye. What is that going to do? So I think if we were to take that forward, there has to be a lot of follow-up work that's also got to be part of the consideration process, which may or may not be something that will be within the gift of the Home Office to do well. If we did it, we'd have to do it well. So that's really what I'm saying. That's part of the consideration process. If you did it, you've got to do it well. And it can't be just on its own without some sort of follow-up support.
Thanks, Angela. Nigel, do you want to comment on engagement and contact?
So can I start with Gertrude? I mean, I think that the Nigerian claims, I will ask policy actually, because I know there've been a number of letters and exchanges on this. I'll just refresh what exchange have been said. The last one I saw was quite a long letter and explaining very great detail what the criteria were and where and why we were with those claims. I see the refusals of international claims before they're refused, so I sign them off. They go to an independent examiner, as you said, and there's a tier 2 review. So if there are individual claims we're concerned about, then they go through the process. Now, I know, Gertrude, you don't agree with that, and you don't agree with the way the policy is being implemented, but I'm confident that my teams make decisions in accordance with the scope of the rules that we've got to apply. Now, and I know we've not agreed for the last 2 years, and we won't agree on that. So on the reconciliation conversation, Angela said she'll take back those reconciliation questions. What I would say on that is, I mean, I have personally gone out to a number of events. I was out in Preston, we had people up in Blackpool. I was over in Manchester at a very big event only 2 weeks ago. My teams are out and about at some of the question events, dealing with individual members of the public and people that come to ask questions about the scheme. What I would say is that somebody put in the sideline that I don't understand the duplicity of, I think, of this. And what I would say to you is that, you know, I've been involved in Windrush since 2018. I set up the task force. I take this very, very personally, and I feel the pain and the trauma. And when I went to the Windrush National Organisation Conference, you know, I spoke to individuals there. If we don't have difficult conversations, these are really difficult conversations, then we're not going to make any progress at all with the scheme or with the wider issues that you and the individual on this call have raised. I only deliver the Windrush compensation scheme, and that's not me being distancing myself. I cannot control those wider injustices that you've spoken about. I can control the Windrush compensation scheme, and that's what I work really, really hard. My teams work hard to deliver to the best of our ability. And we try and come out and try and understand the torture, the trauma, the feelings that people have experienced, and they need to then re-experience when they apply for compensation. But I guess that the Home Office is never going to be an organisation that can engender that confidence with many communities, because the wider Home Office, it's 30,000 people, is involved in a lot of different immigration, law and order things that are developed by Parliament, by our politicians, and that department then, our department, delivers. That felt like a politician's answer. What I'm saying to you is that I've talked about people behind the process, and that includes me. I've had some of my senior operational leads on this call. I've had some of my senior policy leads on this call, and they've joined me. Marianne, who leads our vulnerable persons team, joined me at the stakeholder event in Manchester. So we are trying to engage, and we're trying to have a constructive conversation. And I understand there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration that goes back a long, long way. But what I'm asking for, what I'm offering, and what I'm suggesting is that we should try and just work through some of that so we can get as much progress as we can.
Okay, thank you, Nigel.
Sorry,
and Angela, I'm going to hand
to a short question.
Yeah, I'm going to hand back over to Bishop Desmond.
Thank you very much, everyone. Unfortunately, now we're not taking any more questions, and I'm just going to summarize the last two items on the agenda so that we can finish on time. Just to let you know, I'm a part of the Windrush 75 steering group, so next month we'll be updating you with that. But if you have got Windrush events that you're planning, please email them through to us here at the WNO so that we can assist in publicising those. Next month, Nigel Guy will share with you what he's putting together for Windrush 75, talk about the Windrush flag, etc. as well. Our conference report, now I'm back to semi-full health, because I've got a chunk of that to do as well, unfortunately. Myself, Reverend Clive, Glenda Caesar, and Lorna Markland, one of our other directors, will be now over the next month or so working on the report from the conference so that we can get that published. That's one of our priorities. In terms of 2023, the feedback that we had was that people have the appetite for another conference, which at the moment, working on that, I can tell you it will be in October. Our planning group from the WNO meet this Thursday, and then after we meet, we'll send out what the date is. But we are planning to have a conference in 2023 in Birmingham, so that will be happening also. In terms now of recommendation 3, I did send a letter into the Home Secretary, or the leader of Birmingham City Council did, which I was unable to sign because I was in Israel, but my name's on that, and that's gone in, raising concerns very, very politely regarding particularly recommendation 3. However, in terms of the Windrush National Organization's strategy document, we expressed an intention to run an event of that nature. So I don't believe that all is lost. We're not funded, but it's going to be our determination to work on that strategy, because sometimes it's better if someone who's totally independent of government runs these sessions instead, and independently fund them as well. That's our view. It's in our strategy document, and it's something that we can look at. As a result of tonight's meeting, Angela, thank you very much for offering to take feedback, but we'll formally send a letter into the Home Secretary, myself and Reverend Foster, to confirm and formally raise our concerns. The reason we hadn't done that yet is because we wanted to have this meeting and take back the views of the meeting so that we can actually feedback from a position whereby we've had feedback and it's not just our own views. So clearly tonight has been productive. It has been useful. Welcome to those who have been coming for just the first time as well. These meetings are more advanced than the basic ones, but please, I mean, you know, we're doing the best that we possibly can. And Hetisha, please send in that information to us. And everyone we've asked to send in information, please do. I've got it written down here. Egbert as well. Please send in the email and I'll make sure you get the appropriate email addresses as well. So on that note, it's 20:32, Reverend Clive. So we've gone over by 2 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'll hand back to you to close.
Thanks, Bishop Desmond, and thanks everyone again, colleagues, for joining today, and the Home Office and everyone. And you know, we'll be continuing to be having these regular monthly meetings where we can, and hopefully as well, we'll be establishing some future in-person meetings as well. So at this point, we're just going to end our session today by the way we started, and we're just going to ask for those who just want to join us in a word of prayer just to close the meeting. We'll do so now. Father, we just thank you for your goodness and your grace towards us. We just pray that you will give us the strength, the wisdom, and the fortitude, Lord, to do this work. Remember those so many people who are hurting, in need. We pray for your mercy and guidance to be upon them, and continue to be with us all as we look to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks again, everyone. Bishop Desmond.
16th of March on Zoom. We'll send the links out to those who have registered. And as Reverend Clive has said, we will be having some face-to-face engagement sessions around the country a bit later on when we've got a bit lighter evenings. But we will be venturing across the country this year during Windrush 75 as well. And just a reassurance that during Windrush 75 celebrations, we will not be forgetting about the fallout from the Windrush scandal, and we will be advocating status on compensation. So please don't think we're going to just be caught up in celebration or commemoration. We will be continuing this work as well. So thank you very much. God bless you all and have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Out there isn't going to have their back.
Night, night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night. Look forward to seeing you all again. Bye-bye.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.